Hello again. It's good to see everyone after a bit of time. I hope you enjoyed your breakout sessions. So welcome to our final plenary before tonight's 10-year celebration. In the past day and a half, we've heard about a lot of hard things. Our world is in crisis, the international development sector is collapsing, and Israel is at war. There is so much that we don't have control over, and I can speak for myself when saying that it can feel overwhelming and I often feel powerless. But there are things that we can control and change as individuals, but even more so as a network. Our closing today is going to focus on finding the motivation and the tools to tackle issues that we can, as a network, affect. This session is generously sponsored by Shalom Corps. And we're going to get a dose of inspiration from two speakers. Rabbi Avi Killip is the Executive Vice President of the Hadar Institute, and Tal Ben-Shahar is an author and lecturer and an expert in positive psychology. Then we will divide into working groups where we will collaborate and share ideas on various topics relating to our network. I will soon share the group topics and everyone will choose the one that's most of interest. So I am honored to invite Rabbi Avi Killip to inspire us with Jewish wisdom and hope. In addition to teaching at Hadar, she shares her insight as the host of Hadar's podcast, Responsa Radio and Tashma. Following that, you will hear from Tal Ben-Shahar, who has shared his renowned expertise about happiness studies with thousands of people worldwide. He will discuss how we can grow from crisis using insights from science. You can find a link to one of his best-selling books, Happier No Matter What, on our app. And, being Diana's brother-in-law, at least one member of her family is represented at Focal Point. So, thank you so much, Avi and Tal.
Move this down. Hi. I'm Rabbi Avi Killip from Hadar, and I have to begin by saying how inspired I am just to be here with all of you in this room. So thank you for the invitation to share some Torah. Today, at the end of June in 2025, it feels like we are too often in the dark. The sense of uncertainty and the fear of what may be lurking around the next corner can be overwhelming. And for those in this room, even more frighteningly, it feels like we are leading in the dark. But we are not the first generation to feel this way. In Sota 21a, the Talmud tells a parable about a person who is lost in the dark, frozen in fear. A parable. A person walking in the dark of night and thick darkness is afraid of the thorns, the pits, the thistles, wild beasts and bandits, and he doesn't know on which road he is walking. If a torch of light comes his way, he is safe from the thorns, the pits, and the thistles, but he's still afraid of the wild animals and the bandits, and he still doesn't know on which road he is walking. When the sun rises at dawn, he is safe from the wild animals and the bandits, but he still does not know on which road he is walking. When he comes to a crossroads, he is safe from all of them. The person in this story is not only lost, but paralyzed with fear. And this fear has layers. They are afraid to take a single step, lest they step on a thorn or fall into a pit. They are afraid of wild animals and bandits that may lurk farther out that can't be seen. And they are fundamentally disoriented, unsure what direction to turn. Does this picture sound familiar? This is how we can feel too. There's so much to be afraid of, so much unknown that can't be seen, layer upon layer of dangers and darkness. The Talmud tells us that a torch could help with the first problem. A candle or a flashlight can keep you from falling into a ditch. A small amount of light can allow you to take each single next step forward. The sun coming up at dawn can protect against the animals and the bandits. Sunlight is a game changer. Once daylight comes, you can see not only the pit directly in front of you, but also the danger lurking farther afield that might have caught you by surprise in the night. And if you're lost, even sunlight won't orient you. Ultimately, only reaching a crossroads, only finding a landmark or a street sign will help you find your way home. The Talmud brings this story to explain a verse from Proverbs, Ki ner mitzvah v'Torah or, for a mitzvah is a lamp and the Torah is light. The parable of a person walking at night is meant to help us understand the relationship between commandments, mitzvot, and the wisdom uncovered through deep learning and reflection, Torah. But isn't it taught, Rabbi Menachem Bar Yossi explained, for the mitzvah is a lamp and the Torah is light. Scripture understands mitzvah as a lamp and the Torah as sunlight. Mitzvah as a lamp to say to you that just as a lamp protects only for a moment, so too mitzvah protects only for a moment. The Torah as light to say to you, just as sunlight protects forever, so too Torah protects forever. Finding our way out of this darkness is a multi-step process. First is mitzvah, the day-to-day actions you take to offer that candle, that flashlight to yourself and others. Each task brings a little more light, protecting against the most imminent danger for the next moment. But that isn't enough, which is why you take time for gatherings like Focal Point. This is the Torah, the sunlight. Taking time to reflect and to learn together, even when the world can feel so clouded and dark, is what will ultimately lead to lasting sunlight and understanding. This is what helps us to see the more distant dangers and to keep each other safe. This is the work of Focal Point, like the work of Olam more broadly, work that will last into the future. And all this hard daily work, all the conferences and learning put together, don't actually eliminate the dangers. The pits and thistles, the wild animals and bandits will always exist in the world. Our job is to keep each other safe. Leading does not mean eliminating any danger. Leading means providing the candle and bringing the sunlight. And even this isn't really enough. We may be safe and still lost. As the Talmud passage teaches, full orientation will come only when we reach a crossroads, and we may not be there today. So my blessing for each of you is that your actions continue to provide light and safety, that you continue to make time for reflection and learning together, and that we each make it safely through the woods until we can meet again at the crossroads. B'hatzlacha.
Good afternoon, everyone. So wonderful to be here. I'm sorry that the Israeli group couldn't join us, and I know that Diana is watching now, and I just have a message for her. You don't need to listen now. This will not be on the final exam. So Diana, we've known each other for many years. We're mishpucha, and you give me this time slot. You know, there is actual research, and I'm going to talk to you a lot about research today, on the worst time to give a talk. Yeah, there's research. There are actually two worst times. One is midnight. The other is, do you want to guess? 3 p.m. What's the time now? Oh, could be worse. It's 3:06. But what an honor to be here, and how important the work that you do is, always, now more than ever. So, you know, I study happiness, I do research in happiness, and it's not been easy teaching this topic over the past 5 years. Because we know there are many benefits to happiness. You increase levels of happiness beyond the fact that it feels good. To feel good, you're also increasing levels of creativity, motivation goes up, physical health improves, relationships are better, you do better at work, you do better at home. There are all these benefits to happiness. And these would usually be enough to justify the study of happiness. But these days, to even talk about happiness seems out of place. You know, it started with COVID, when one of my friends from Israel actually said to me, Tal, shouldn't we quarantine happiness at least for a while? It just doesn't fit into the reality. Now with the wars going on, of course, Middle East, around the world, I don't know if talking about happiness is that important, or at least that's a question. And what I want to do is make an argument for why the science of happiness, the science of well-being, is in fact not just relevant today, I would argue more relevant than ever. And my argument rests on a concept, on an idea that was introduced by Professor Nassim Taleb, originally from Lebanon, now teaching right around the corner at NYU. And Nassim Taleb introduces us to the idea, to the concept of anti-fragility, or what I've come to call resilience 2.0. These days, if you want to be cool, you have to have something 2.0. Mine, resilience, taken, sorry. So what's resilience 2.0? What's anti-fragility, according to Nassim Taleb? So let's begin with resilience 1.0, traditional resilience. Actually a term taken from engineering. You take certain material, put pressure, stress on it. As a result of the pressure, the stress, it changes form. If it's resilient, when you let go of the stress, it goes back to where it was before. So take a piece of rubber, you squish it. If it's resilient, let go, it goes back to where it was before. Or a ball, you drop it. If it's resilient, it bounces back up to where it was before. That's why we talk about resilient individuals as bouncing back. So that's 1.0. What's resilience 2.0? What's anti-fragility? Anti-fragility takes the idea a step further. So you take certain material, you put pressure, stress on it. Again, if it's resilient, you let go, it goes back to where it was before. Resilience 2.0, anti-fragility, it actually grows bigger, stronger, better as a result of the pressure and the stress. Or a ball, you drop it. Resilience 1.0, it bounces back up to where it was before. Resilience 2.0, anti-fragility, it bounces back higher than it was before. So this term was introduced about 10, 15 years ago. A new concept, important concept with, as you will see shortly, remarkable implications for physical health, for mental health, for international health. But more on that in a minute. So it was introduced 10 to 15 years ago. Not so in our tradition. Within Judaism, this very idea was actually introduced thousands of years ago in our language, in Ivrit. Let's look at the word that introduces this. The word is mashber, crisis. So mashber has, in fact, two meanings. The first meaning of the word mashber, crisis, comes from the word shever. Same three letters, same root, shever. Shever means break, means fragile. So that's the first meaning of the word mashber. When that happens, you break, you go through a crisis. But there is a second meaning to the word mashber. Mashber, a biblical word, is the chair upon which a woman sits when she gives birth. So while mashber can be, as a crisis, leading to a breakdown, it also denotes the word that applies to the ultimate place from which life grows. Birth. So mashber can lead to shever, breakdown, or to growth, development. In other words, mashber can lead to fragility or anti-fragility. And understanding this word, it turns out, you'll see momentarily, has significant implications for our physical and mental health. So it turns out that there are anti-fragile systems that grow as a result of pressure and stress. There are anti-fragile systems all around us as well as within us. I want to give you a couple of examples, one physiological, the other psychological. The physiological example, think about our muscles. You go to the gym, you lift weights. What happens? You go once, you go 3 times, you go 30 times. As a result of the pressure and stress that you're putting on your muscles, you actually grow bigger, stronger, healthier. We are potentially an anti-fragile system. Let me give you another example, this time psychological. I want to see a quick show of hands. Please put your hand up if you've heard of the term PTSD. Please put your hand up. All right, just about everyone. PTSD stands for post-traumatic stress disorder. You go through severe stress, a trauma. As a result of it, you break. Very often people experiencing PTSD struggle for the rest of their lives. I want to see a show of hands now. Please put your hands up if you've heard of the term PTG. If you've heard of the term PTG, and you haven't been to one of my lectures about PTG, please put your hand up. Okay, so about, 5% of people heard of PTG. Everyone has heard of PTSD. PTG stands for post-traumatic growth. So whereas PTSD is breaking down, the first meaning of the word mashber, shever, PTG is the second meaning of the word mashber. It is about anti-fragility, growing as a result of hardships, difficulties, challenges, even traumas. Now it turns out, there's a lot of research on PTG over the past 15 years, Tedeschi, Calhoun, others, showing that PTG is potentially twice as likely as PTSD. PTG, anti-fragility, is potentially twice as likely as PTSD, fragility. If, and here comes the big if. First of all, we know about the existence of PTG, or some related concept like anti-fragility, like mashber and its two meanings, like resilience 2.0. So simply knowing that PTG is in the realm of possibilities, that in and of itself makes it significantly more likely to actually happen. And remember, most people have never heard of PTG, or resilience 2.0, or anti-fragility. Second, it is valuable, important, in fact critical, to increase the likelihood of post-traumatic growth, to know some of the conditions that we can put in place, some interventions, some practices that don't guarantee because nothing can guarantee. but can significantly increase the likelihood that we will actually grow from hardships, difficulties, even from traumas. Now, most people have never heard of these terms, PTG, anti-fragility, resilience 2.0, and most people certainly don't know what conditions to put in place. And here lies the importance of the science of happiness today, especially today. First of all, to introduce us to these ideas, and second, to introduce us to the conditions that we can put in place, whether it's in our homes, whether it's in our organizations, in our communities, around the world, to significantly increase the likelihood that we will actually grow through the many traumatic experiences that so many people are going through these days. So what are the conditions that we can put in place? I'm going to elaborate on one, but before I go into the one, here is just sort of a laundry list of some of the things that we can do. The first one is physical exercise. You know, I often ask my students, college students, so tell me, when is the time that you're least likely to exercise? And when do you think that is? Exams, finals, papers are due. And the point is that these are the most important times to exercise. It turns out, this is research by Dijksterhuis from, big surprise, Holland, who talks about how physical toughness translates into mental toughness. So physical exercise, especially, always important, especially during difficult times, is critical. Nefesh bria beguf bari. The Rambam spoke about the importance of movement, especially during difficult times. Another very important condition that we can put in place to significantly increase the likelihood of post-traumatic growth is gratitude. You know, what is the first word that a Jew says in the morning? First word, not two words. Word, modeh. It's not modeh ani. And you know, the sentence structure here is strange. What do you mean modeh ani? Ani modeh. You don't say grateful I am. You say I am grateful. But the powers that be wanted the first word in the morning to be gratitude, not I. And it turns out that this very simple practice of expressing gratitude contributes significantly to mental health and to physical health. It actually strengthens our immune system. Another important condition for increasing the likelihood of post-traumatic growth is relationships. In fact, relationships are the number one predictor of both physical health and mental health. So being there for one another as a community is critical for anti-fragility, as well as, of course, for general happiness. Okay, so these are some of the conditions that we can put in place. Now I want to focus on one relating to relationships. And this one is at the very heart of your work, what you're dedicating yourself to. And that is giving. So I want to share with you one of my favorite studies in psychology. So this was conducted as a joint venture between Harvard Business School and the University of British Columbia. Here's what they did. They bring in a group of people. And imagine you're a participant in this study. You come in to a room and they measure your levels of happiness. We know how to do that very well today. We can either do it through questionnaires, we do it through physiological measures, neurological measures. We actually know what a happy brain looks like. So they measure levels of happiness, and then they give you a nice sum of money. Just give you a nice sum of money, and then they tell you, go spend this money on yourself, go buy yourself something. And you do, And you go out and you buy yourself a gadget, or you buy yourself shoes, or whatever. And after the shopping spree, you go back to the lab, and once again they measure your levels of happiness. What do you think they find after the shopping spree? Happiness levels go up significantly. This is important research. This is the first time in recorded history that we have scientific evidence for Carrie Bradshaw's claim from Sex and the City that buying shoes makes you happier. So have we found the secret to happiness? Shopping? Not so quickly. Following day, 24 hours later, they go back to the lab again. And once again, they measure their levels of happiness. What do you think they find? After 24 hours, one day, right back down to where it was before. So there was a shopper's high, it doesn't last. So what's the conclusion from this research? You need to go shopping every day. Exactly. Very good, you get an A. Or maybe there is a less expensive solution. Maybe a better solution. Group number 2. Different people coming to the lab. Imagine you're a part of group number 2. They measure levels of happiness. Just like group number 1, after measuring happiness, they give you a nice sum, the exact same amount of money. And then they tell you, go spend this money. Only this time they say, go spend it on someone else. So you do. And you go out and you buy homeless people meals, you give it to tzedakah, charity, you buy your partner shoes, whatever, but you spend it on someone else. And you go back to the lab. They measure your levels of happiness after the act of charity. What do they find? Happiness levels go up to the exact same degree as the shoppers' happiness levels went up, with, of course, one very big difference. Following day, they go back to the lab, measure their levels of happiness again. What they find, it does go down slightly though. It's still significantly higher than it was at base level, before their act of giving, before their act of charity. Even after a week, they see the impact of that act of giving. There are so many benefits to giving, to charity. And it's not just material giving as in the study that I shared. This also applies to spiritual giving. Sonia Lubomirsky did research asking people to commit to 5 extra acts of kindness a week. Nothing major, can be small acts of kindness, but be deliberate about doing extra acts of kindness. And what happened as a result? Happiness levels of the givers went up. As a result, resilience went up. They became more anti-fragile as a result of those acts of kindness, of giving. The nice thing also about kindness and giving is that it's contagious. Quite literally, when we observe acts of kindness, our mirror neurons light up, and we're more likely to act kindly. So maaseh tov gorer maasim tovim. One good deed leads to others. And the other nice thing about kindness, in the words of Anne Frank, you can always give something, even if it is only kindness. There's another form of kindness that you practice a lot, I'm sure. And that has to do with acts of leadership. So there's been a lot of research on leadership over the past, more than 100 years. And they've always looked for that one character trait, characteristic, one behavior that is mostly responsible for great, extraordinary leadership. And they looked for it in charisma. And they found, charisma, nice to have, absolutely not essential for extraordinary leadership. Again, leadership that's needed in extraordinary times like today. They looked for intelligence. Yeah, some intelligence, of course, is important for leadership, but overrated, it turns out. Eloquence, nice, absolutely not necessary. Then one characteristic that they found among the greatest, the extraordinary leaders, is their ability to listen. Also, great parenting. Parenting is leadership. Great parents listen. When employees in an organization are listened to, they're less likely to leave. It's especially relevant today with a high turnover. We see a hint for the importance of listening in the Torah. The story of Moshe Rabbeinu. God approaches Moshe, the beginning, and says to him, you're the one. You're going to take my people, deliver them from slavery to freedom. You're my man. And what does Moses say? Thanks, but no thanks. Why? Ki kvad pe ukvad lashon anochi. In other words, because I stutter, because I have a speech impediment. And yet God chooses him. And the message here is very clear. It doesn't matter so much what you say, how you say it. You still have your 2 ears and you can listen. And you can be extraordinary. You know, I teach around the world to different audiences. Most of them not Jewish, because we're not most. And yet, wherever I teach, I always teach them a word, sometimes more than a word, but a word in Hebrew. And the word that I teach them, when I teach about the importance of giving, is the word to give. And I say that the word to give in Hebrew comes from the root Natan. And then I ask them, you know the name Nathan? They say, yes. Well, Nathan in Hebrew is Natan. And here is how you would spell it in Roman letters and in Hebrew letters. And of course, do you notice something unique, unusual about that word? It's symmetrical. It's a palindrome. It reads the same left to right and right to left. That's no coincidence. There is a great deal of wisdom. Just like in the word mashber, there is a great deal of wisdom in our language, in the Torah, that tells us what matters. What and how. Torah, it guides us as to how to live our life. And there's no more powerful way to raise our levels of well-being in general, and specifically anti-fragility, than through the act of giving. Because when we give, even if it's in the most difficult times, we shift from the experience of helplessness to helpfulness. And through that, from hopelessness to hopefulness. And that's where tikva comes in, hope. You know that the difference between sadness and depression, the difference between sadness and depression is that depression is sadness without hope. Sadness we all experience, 10 times a day, natural human emotion. Depression, that's when things become more challenging. And when we have hope, we become anti-fragile, and we deliver it through shifting from being helpless to helpful, hopeless to hopeful. I want to end with one final study. I'm particularly proud of this study, not because I conducted it, but because one of my students did. Adam Grant, today a professor at Wharton Business School, 25 years ago an undergraduate at Harvard, did the following study. He divided employees in organizations, different for-profit, not-for-profit, banks, schools, government, you name it, divided them into three groups: the givers, the takers, and the matchers. The givers are the nice ones. They're generous, they're kind, they listen, they help, they contribute. We like them. Then there are the takers. Takers are all about me, me, me. Who do they take from? Those willing to give. And then there are the matchers. Matchers are all about quid pro quo. Matchers, for those of you who speak Hebrew, are no flyers. You give me 5, I'll give you 5 back. You just gave me 3, sorry, that's all you're getting from me, because it's fair. Now we all have the giver, the taker, and the matcher within us. Different contexts, different times in our lives. The question is always of degree, which is the dominant one? And it turns out that that matters a lot. When it comes to organizational success, your organization, it's better to have givers. By the way, it's also better for a bank to have givers, and for a consulting company, and for a school. For an organization, you want to have as many givers as possible. Makes sense, because they help everyone grow. They teach, they help, they listen, they're kind, they're generous. But what about for individual success? What about when you tell your child, and you want them to succeed in life, to do well? We all do. What do you tell them? Be a giver, a taker, maybe a matcher? Not to be a flyer? What do you tell them? Here the answer is less clear-cut than it is in organizations. Again, in organizations you want givers. But what about for individual success? This is what Adam Grant and his colleagues looked at. And specifically, what they did, they divided all these organizations into 3 levels of effectiveness in terms of employees' performance. They looked at the best performing employees, the average performers, and the worst performers. And what they found, no big surprise, is that all 3 levels, you have all 3 archetypes. You know, the best you have givers, matchers, and takers. Among the average performers you have givers, matchers, and takers, as among the worst. But to different degrees, and once again, degrees matter here. At the top, the best performers. Again, you have all 3 groups, givers, matchers, and takers, but disproportionately represented at the top by far. Disproportionately represented at the top are the givers. Whew, relief. How about in the middle, the average performers? Again, you have all 3 groups. Disproportionately represented are the takers and the matchers. What's going on here? How about the worst performers? Again, disproportionately represented there are givers. Now this is where research becomes interesting, because the question is, what's the difference? What's the difference between givers at the top and givers at the bottom? Both groups are nice, kind, they listen, they help, contribute, we like them, and yet there is a very big difference between the givers at the top and the givers at the bottom. And that is that the givers at the top also give themselves, whereas the givers at the bottom neglect themselves. They care about everyone else, the whole world, העולם כולו, but they forget to take care of themselves as individuals. And that kind of giving is just not sustainable. Now, we're reminded of the importance of this every time we get on a plane. You really want to help others, help yourself first. So, someone comes to me for help. Sure, I'll help. Let me just first take care of this project that I'm working on, and then I'll help you. Or kids come to mom, dad. I'll be with you shortly, sweetie. First of all, I'm exercising. I'm taking care of myself, and then I'll be with you. So it is about helping others, very much so. All the research tells us that. Personal experiences tell us that. And it's also about helping ourselves. In the words of the Dalai Lama, caring for others based only on your sacrifice doesn't last. Caring must also feed you. But again, we don't need to go all the way to Asia, all the way to Tibet or India to gain this wisdom. A couple of years before the Dalai Lama, someone else said something similar. If I'm not for myself, who will be for me? But if I'm only for myself, who am I? And if not now, when? Im lo achshav ei matai. This is the time. And we know that when we take care of others and ourselves, that's when we become anti-fragile. And when we encourage others to do the same, that's when they become anti-fragile. And from a mashber that the world really is going through. I mean, literally now. Certainly our people and others. From this mashber we can grow if we just listen. If we listen to the meaning of mashber, the importance of hodaya, gratitude, the value of netina, giving to others and giving to ourselves. You know, there's a strong distinction in the English language between the two words, selfishness and selflessness. You open the dictionary, what is selfish? Selfish is synonymous with being unkind, ungenerous, being self-centered. It's considered immoral even, being selfish. On the other hand, you have selfless. It's about being generous and kind and moral and ethical. But this distinction is a false distinction. So rather than thinking about selfishness or selffulness, we need to think about that person at the top, that giver at the top, who is giving others and giving her or himself. And instead of being selfish or selfless, that person is self-full. Bringing these two together, as does Hillel in his wisdom. So I want to end by expressing gratitude to Olam, to you, to your organization, for doing what you do. Avodat Kodesh, work that is so very important. A, because you're helping all those people you're helping around the world, and B, because you're exemplifying the very traits, characteristics, ways of being, embodying self-fullness. Thank you. Toda Rabba. Yishar Koach.